Welcome you lot to Match Catch Media. We're here again inside for another video in your ultimate guide to rigs. So how do I tie up most of my rigs? The same as pretty much everybody else, if I'm completely honest, but nonetheless, if you like these videos, this is how I do mine in particular. There's a few little tips for you along the way in terms of how I tie things, which loops I use, that kind of stuff, what tackle that I'm using that helps me get some really good results out on the bank. So first really with rigs is line. For me, I use this pretty much for everything really. It's 015 optimum power, which is, it's just superb. I use this for everything up to kind of 6 to 8 pound fish. If I'm catching fish that are starting to approach double figures, especially down the edge, obviously I'm gonna up that line. You know, I'm going to use 020 or 022 for that kind of fishing, but that's not the kind of thing I need to worry about this time of year. I used to be in the club of fining everything down completely, so my main line used to be like 012 or 013, dropping down to a 0.08, 0.09 kind of hook length. 015 is discreet enough to keep my bites coming and not to disturb the fish, but it's also robust enough to do everything I need it to. It's the best of both worlds essentially. So like I said, I use it for all of my rigs. It's the starting point for everything that I tie. So that's 015 in optimum power by map. So the first thing I need to do for tying my rig is to get my float of choice onto the main line. So all I'm going to do is cut off nice and easy 3 pieces of silicone. So each one's about sort of 5 mil. 2 of them are about 5 mil, and I'm going to do one that's about 8 mil, just a little bit longer, just to go on the bottom of the float. So you can see them there, look nice and easy, dotted along. So they'll sit on that float. That's actually fine. Float I'm using today is a 4x12 Finesse pattern with a 1.2 hollow bristle. So it's again something that I use for most of my fishing really. It's really good for like a maggot rig that's just dropping through the water, with it being a carbon stem, but equally as well with it, you know, it just gives you that slightly more less resistance and that better bite indication, even if you're fishing pellets for F1s as well, or skimmers or anything like that. So kind of does the best of both worlds. And with this being a 4x14s or a 0.4 of a gram, I'm going to be using it in kind of 5.5 foot of water is what the intention is. Okay, so once you've picked your float, it's just a case of getting that on the line first. So I've got the line running up here, up to the spool, as you can see there, and I'm gonna put the line's gonna go through the eye of the float, with the orange part, or the tip of the float, the indication part of the float, is going to be looking up the rig. Okay, I don't want to put it on backwards, so I'm going to thread that line through that eye like that, and I can push the float up on the rig just out of the way, light on that mat like that. So then I'm going to take my pieces of silicone, the 2 smaller ones first. There we go, 1. So 2, and then the slightly longer piece to finish with. 3, just like that. So what I want to do then is I just wet my float slightly and pop these pieces of silicone on. So that's 1. If I just wet it, it just goes on a little bit easier. I'm not quite sure why we always use 3 actually, because I've never had one come off. So this one here, I have it slightly longer at the bottom. Let's move it down slightly, there we go. Just so I can have it so that let's just use another float to point. Okay, just the end bit here, I just want it to overhang the carbon stem slightly, and it just means that when everything's moving around, it stops it from tangling around it. So it's just that I just leave that overhanging. And also the top one, I don't want it right up here against the body, because it means that when you move the float up or down a line, the line cuts into the body of the float, which is what you don't need. So I'll give it a little bit of space there, about 1 centimetre then we've got the first piece of silicone, second one halfway down, and third one, which is a bit longer, hanging over the edge. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to tie a loop in the end of the line. So for this I use a loop tire, Sensus loop tire. You can see there, they come in two sizes. This is the bigger one of the two, which basically gives me like about 5-6 maybe millimeter loop, just nice and tidy. So I'm just going to do that. Always wet the knot, pull it tight, and then I'm going to cut the end off, the tag end. There we go, and I'm left with a really tidy loop, as you can see there now, dead straightforward. Okay, so that's on the end there. So now when it comes to shot, so this is a 4x14 float, so I know this is going to take 9 number 9s in this case, and what I do is I put 9 number 9s on there, and then I put a few 13 dropper shot on there as well. It just means that it'd probably be slightly too much to start with, but I can bite them off, and just so I can have that float dotted down exactly the way I want it. So all I'm going to do is make you can buy rig boards and all kinds of stuff really, but I just use a heavy candle actually, and I just pop that bump on top of that spool like that, because that means then when I pull the line, the spool's not going to turn around. I can keep it nice and tight, and it just makes life even easier. You can use any kind of weight or heavy something to put on the end. Yeah, for this rig I'm going to use Stots. It just means that I can move them up and down the line without damage to them. So for these patterns at this time of year, sometimes I want a strung out bulk that's even pattern at the bottom of the rig. Sometimes I want a tapered pattern so that they get closer together as they move towards the float, to give us that kind of best of both worlds. And sometimes I'll want a bulk and 1 dropper, or a bulk and 2 droppers, or a bulk and 3 droppers. So it depends on what I want on that for this particular rig really. If I did it with shot, it's much harder to move it up and down the line, and it damages the line, which you don't want even at 0.15. So for me, I use Stots for a lot of the stuff, not for everything, but again you can see that in another video. Okay, so popping them on the line, let's just move that way a bit. I hold it nice and tight, and dead straightforward really. All I do is pop it round my finger like that, and then I'm using my pincers. You can use pincers or pliers. I can just gently squeeze it together, and that's one on, dead straightforward. And so for this one I'm going to do 2 droppers in the bulk. Obviously, if you're doing a float that you've not used before, or you've changed the brand of float that you use or something like that, you just want to pop it into a shot-in tube, at some water, so that you can just test to make sure you've got the weight kind of right. But I know from experience this is quite right on here. So there we go. You can see there my fingers on the loop. Stop it from vibrating. So I've got a number 9, about 4 inches, and another number 9, and then up to a bulk. Okay. Obviously you can see on my mat here, you can see across the top, this is like an overgrown mouse mat. It's perfect for doing hook lengths and rigs on, to be fair. But I've just measured out inches on there, so I can put it on there if I want to make sure it's exactly right and exactly as I need it to be. But just for the moment, that's what we're having there. And I'm going to put my droppers on. So it takes 9 number 9s, so I'll put 8 on there, and then I'm just going to put very, very tiny 4 number 13s. So this is where it gets super fiddly. Okay, so there you can see it. You can see it there now. Nice and straightforward. So I've got my bulk that's all spread out here, and obviously I've just got those little droppers which I can bunch up together, or I can just bite them off if they're a little bit too heavy. So it just means I can get that rig dotted down to exactly where I need it to be. So I've got 4 inches above what will be the hook length on the mat here, and then 6 inches, and then up at 18 is my bulk. Okay, so popping it on your winder. Again, this is kind of, you know how much you want. So I know for me that 12 turns give me enough to fish in 6 foot of water plus a nice long lash if I need it. So that's kind of what I'm looking for on this particular winder for me. When you've got your hook length on loop to loop, it's really important that you put the loop on. I don't want to put it around this bit at the top here. If I do that, when I take it off, it can have like a little kink in a line, and your hook length will kick off and it won't sit straight. So you want it to be something like this one here, where the loop will sit on that and it will keep the loop nice and straight. So I'll just show you that. I'm going to take the loop end of the rig. I'm just going to put it over there so you can see then that, like that. Hopefully you can see it nice and clearly. The loop just sits on there and it's nice and straight. And all I'm going to do then is just wind it on. So that's 1, 2, 3. Make sure your float is protected within it. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. When I get to 12, I just kind of hold the line where it is on the winder, like that. So I've got my thumb just on the edge of where it is, like that. Okay, and then I fold the line over there and make a loop, and then I just wet it, and an overhand loop. Oh, like that, goes through there, and I do it nice and big, and then make sure you cut the right end off that's near the spool. So what I end up then with is a nice big loop on the line, and you can see there like that. Now that's fine, you can go on the winder like that. What I like to do, just because it makes it easier to take the rig off your connector on the pole, I want to put another figure of 8 loop, a bit similar to what we did at the other end of the rig that attaches the hook length. I want to put another one in the top, and it just means that when it goes around the Dacron, you're left with a little loop. All you've got to do then is pull that little loop, and it undoes it from the Dacron or from the elastic or from however you're tying it on, crow's foot or whatever. It just means it's easier getting your rigs on and off your pole. So I do another overhand loop within the one that I've just tied. Like that, and for this one I use just a regular loop tire, so I use the 10mm one. Again, I wet it before it actually ties the knot. There we go, like that. So this is the actual loop that I'll use here. That's the actual loop that I'll use to attach it to the elastic or to the Dacron, and then just the other side of that I've got another loop, which just means that once I've put it on there I can untie it, and it's dead easy. So what I'm going to do is pop that now on there. So if I've done it correctly, it just sits at the end of that rig. Pop it on the slider, and there we go. 4x14s, 1.2mm bristle, Pella and maggot carbon stem rig, dead straightforward. That's how I tie mine. Obviously the other rigs that I do in a very, very similar fashion, it's just making sure you've got the right weight on your line, or you might want to tie multiple up with certain shotting patterns, so you can swap and change that way if you prefer, but obviously that's a personal choice. So there we go. Please don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. It's completely free and it's going to stay that way. It really, really helps us out as well, and we hope that it brings a bit more joy to your fishing. We'll see you on the bank very, very soon. Take care, stay safe. Bye bye.